So I was scrolling the internet and I came across a video from the TYT sports team talking about a lawsuit that's been filed against an Alabama police officer for an incident of excessive force. And when I watched the video, I don't know how I missed it, but this is one of the most heartbreaking and unnecessary uses of force on a compliant person I've ever seen in my life. Let's talk about it. What's up, you guys? Welcome back to Southern Draw Law. My name is James White, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, former police officer. So we'll start with the factual background. The parties involved in this are this gentleman named Micah Washington, who was driving a vehicle just outside of a town called Reform, Alabama, which is ironic. But anyway, I digress. A Reform, Alabama police officer named Dana Elmore, a Pickens County, Alabama sheriff's deputy named Jody Elmore, that would be her husband. And then there are three plaintiffs. There's Micah Washington, who is the driver and the primary person having force applied to him. And then you have Jacorian Henry, who was accompanying Mr. Washington. And then you have a minor named Shaquem Washington. That will be the person referred to in the pleadings as SW because he was a minor at the time. So just looking at the factual allegations here as laid out in the complaint. On the morning of December 2nd, 2023, Mr. Washington and Mr. Henry were traveling along County Road 27 in Pickens County, Alabama, where they stopped to change a flat tire. Mr. Washington was driving. He stopped the vehicle on the shoulder of the road to change the tire. They were only yards away from Mr. Washington's destination, which was his aunt's house, but he felt like he could not drive any further. So he and Mr. Henry walked to Mr. Washington's aunt's house to get tools in order to change the flat tire. And then they also recruited Mr. Washington's younger brother, Shaquem. The men went back to the car and began changing the tire. And a few minutes into their repair, defendant Officer Dana Elmore stopped and joined the men on the side of the road.
And so are you aware that this has gone national, this video?
Yes, man. Like, I've been trying to actually just stay out of social media because, like, I don't like seeing the video. Like, it just do something to me. Like, I just can't watch it. Like, me personally. Like, I can watch it, but, like, with the sound on, no, I can't do it.
So take me back through what you remember. I mean, from what your attorney said, you were just simply out changing a tire near your home?
Yes, man. Like, I was near my aunt's. I was going to pick up my little brother because I always go get him, like, every other weekend or whatever. Gordo area coming into a Reform, my tire had a real bad blowout. So I was trying to call my aunt, but like I couldn't get in touch with her, so I tried to get the car closest I could to her. So once I got there, I parked and I walked to her house or whatever. I left the car, went and got some tools, and then me, my brother, and my co-defendant walked back to the car. I was on the ground changing the tire when the police officer pulled up. She was basically like, what you guys doing? We told her we're changing the tire. She get out, she check out the tire or whatever. Then she she asked for our IDs. So me personally, I was like, if this not a traffic stop, so why you need an ID? So, but I still gave it to her trying to be in compliance. So I gave her my ID and I'm still asking the same question, like, what's the purpose of you needing IDs? That's when she finally feels some type of way or whatever. So she told me to go stand on the back of the car and I was like, I'm not being detained. So I don't have to do anything. So like, you know, so once I told her that or whatever, she said, well, now you are. She grabbed me. Like I put my hands up or whatever. So 'cause I was standing like between the back door and the driver door and I was trying to grab my phone so I could turn my camera on and record her. So like once I finally got my camera on, then she tased me the first time. And she put her foot in my back on the ground.
So you fell down after being tased?
Yes, ma'am. I dropped my phone and stuff. Yes, ma'am. So she had me face down in the road first, like, so I put my hands behind my back so she could start tasing me or whatever.
What you guys might not know is that much of my audience skews above 55, like a substantial portion of it, over 50%. And that means that people are either dealing with or on the on-ramp to dealing with Medicare. And guys, what goes on in Medicare is wild. There are thousands of Medicare plans out there, and a lot of what people see and read is flat out misleading. Even the Medicare.gov provider directory has had documented errors. And then you've got commission hungry Medicare agents who are only pushing the plans that pay them the most, not necessarily the ones that are best for you. It's a mess. And the wrong decision can literally cost you thousands of dollars. I want to help y'all cut through the noise, which is why I'm telling you about the sponsor of today's video, Chapter. They're the only national Medicare advisor that compares and recommends every plan. They give objective advice, which helps them save people an average of $1,100 a year on healthcare costs. These guys won't push you to buy a plan that you don't want, and their support, I know it sounds unbelievable, is completely free. If you're anywhere close to 65, or maybe you are on disability and you have Medicare, or you're on the on-ramp to getting Medicare and you have questions about Medicare coverage, don't guess and do not settle. Call Chapter at 424-389-2979 or go to askchapter.com/Southern. They'll help you understand your enrollment options, and they'll use their expertise to try to help you save on your health care in ways that will actually benefit you. So again, the number is 424-389-2979. Give Chapter a call today. So we're going to watch the video here in just a second, but I want to just sort of frame it up. Now, keep in mind, you'll see in the video, the vehicle's off the roadway. So there's no obstruction to the highway. There's no obstruction to the road, anything like that. They're changing the tire in the grassy area on the shoulder of the road. They are not in the roadway. So the beginning of this video is going to be, this guy is down on the ground. He has been shot with the taser, and he is already handcuffed when this footage starts. So we're going to go ahead and check out the video that was actually taken by the 16-year-old brother, Shaquem, and we'll talk about the law and how this thing should shake out on the other side of the video. I want to warn you, it's heartbreaking and it's difficult to watch. Let's check it out.
Stand up. Right there on the front of the car. Straight.
I ain't doing but I got gun right there. I'm not doing it.
So when she get me onto the car or whatever, I let her know, like, I got a gun on me. Like, so it won't go any farther than it did. So
Okay, so let's stop there. You had a legally carried gun.
yes, ma'am. Once she found the gun, so she made a comment, oh yeah. I was like, what's the problem? Like, basically, like, asked her, why you saying that? She, like she didn't want me to talk at all, basically. So when I asked her that, that's when she tased me again.
I ain't doing but I got gun right there. I'm not doing it.
Oh yeah.
I'm saying we can say, oh yeah, fuck. I'm not. Oh my God. Okay. Oh, down. Oh my. Oh my God.
You want it again?
No, man.
Shut the up. You was big and bad. Shut your up.
So to understand what really happened here, you have to start with a simple question, just from sort of a constitutional criminal procedure. And that question is the same as it always is. What authority did the officer actually have under Alabama law before any of this started, right? So because the Constitution doesn't regulate how politely police talk to people, though it might be helpful if it did, what it regulates is when the government can seize you, right? And a seizure, as we know, is either when the government uses force against you or you submit to their demand to do something like give your ID, control your movement, whatever. You submit to their authority. That's when you're seized. And so remember, they were basically just off the roadway. They're on County Road 27 in Pickens County, Alabama, because they had a flat tire. The vehicle was not blocking traffic and it wasn't sitting in the roadway. It was off the road in the grass on the shoulder. And that detail matters because under Alabama law, there's no prohibition for a disabled vehicle to be off of the road onto the shoulder in the grass. Changing a flat tire on the shoulder is not a crime. It is not a traffic violation, and therefore there's no underlying lawful basis for identification. So at the moment, legally speaking, Dana Elmore had the same authority any other citizen would have. She could walk up, she could have a consensual conversation, and she could ask questions, and she could even offer to help, which is what she should have done, right, if she's going to stop at all. But that's obviously not what she did. The Fourth Amendment draws a line between consensual conversations, obviously, and detaining someone or seizing them, right? And remember, according to the complaint, the officer demands identification. Now, Alabama law does require identifying to a police officer, but only after a lawful investigatory detention based on reasonable suspicion that a crime has occurred. Remember, that's going to follow the Brown versus Texas standard. Unless you have reasonable articulable suspicion sufficient to perform a Terry detention, you're not going to be able to demand lawfully ID or charge somebody for not giving it to you. They can't just demand identification from someone standing on the roadside unless there's already a lawful basis for them to conduct a Terry detention. But Washington and the other plaintiffs, they did what was asked and they handed over their identification. And at that point, the officer's request had already been satisfied. So even to the extent that there was a lawful basis, there was no crime because the identification had been tendered, which constitutes a seizure. Then Elmore takes it one step further and she tries to get him to go to her car. He pushes back, and legally this is the moment that the entire encounter sort of shifts from a conversation to a forced detention. Even if you were to articulate in defense of this officer that this person wasn't seized because he just gave the ID. The second that she starts to control his movements and then punishes him for not complying, that's for sure when he's seized, no matter what. And once that seizure occurs, the Constitution asks a simple question. What crime or what legal predicate justified the detention? And based on the allegations in the complaint and the video that we just watched, the answer appears to be absolutely nothing. Car was off the roadway. There was no disturbance. There was no report of criminal activity that had been made. We have nothing, right? We have nothing except guys trying to fix their vehicles so they can get off the roadway and wondering why they're being harassed by the police and asking for an explanation. Then, after Washington pushes back on the order to go stand in front of her car, he pulls out his phone and he starts recording. And shortly after that, Officer Elmore deploys her taser for the first time. And that moment matters even more because the taser is not considered minimal force, like, soft, empty hand controls or something where you might just kind of move a person to where you want them to be. Courts treat that as an intermediate force, which means that officers have to have some justification that concerns a real safety issue in order to tase somebody under general circumstances. This guy, as you can see, when she's getting him up from the ground and walking him to the patrol car, you can see that there's an enormous size disparity between the two of them. So if she had tried to place him under a lawful arrest and he had started giving her a little bit of pushback or basically tried to bow up on her or something, then you might have justification for a taser because of the size difference. But we don't have that here. We don't even have a lawful basis for the detention at this point. And certainly not a lawful basis to be handcuffing people and taking them and bending them over a car and all that stuff. Once she gets him over to the car, I would argue here that he's under arrest. I mean, he's been tasered. He's handcuffed behind his back. And at this point, there is no reason whatsoever to use force on this guy. Let's just be honest. The dude is like 6'5", he's a big guy. She's a small person. If he was a threat to her, she would have known it long before she would have had an opportunity to do anything about it. This guy's handcuffed behind his back. He's being roughed up by this lady. What's the basis for it? She asked for the ID, even though she didn't have a lawful basis for it, and he gave it to her. So all he did was refuse to go over and stand in front of her car, which, again, she didn't have a lawful basis to demand anyway. And then he gets tasered, and then he gets tasered again, which we saw in the second part of that video where she's got him bent over the car. The officer eventually charged Washington with several crimes, including obstruction of government operations, which ostensibly would either be the failure to obey the lawful order that wasn't lawful, either in giving the ID or moving, resisting arrest, marijuana possession, of course, because you always got to have something you got to throw in there. And then you got felon in possession of a firearm and drug trafficking and fentanyl. Well, it turns out that Micah Washington was not a prohibited person and he was armed lawfully. So these were just trumped up charges and were almost immediately dismissed, at least the most serious ones. And we know that because their complaint further alleges that the charges were fabricated in order to justify the arrest and get the bonds to be set as high as they possibly could to keep the plaintiffs in jail.
At what point did you find out they were charging you with trafficking fentanyl?
I didn't know I was getting charged with trafficking fentanyl until I actually went to court the next day because they wouldn't let me make no phone calls or nothing at all. When I first got to the jail, they just told them we gonna book them on no bond and don't put any charges on them until we come back and tell y'all what to actually put. But they was trying to say they was holding me on the theft of property to get me to the jail.
Gotcha. And so they had searched your pockets. As your attorney said, there was no baggies, there was no substance. So was this fentanyl charge just made up?
Yeah, it had to be because I didn't have any drugs on me at all. The only thing I had in my pocket was my gun and my phone.
So let's talk about the gun here because that sort of created this, at least a safety dynamic, we'll call it. But after the first taser and after Washington is placed in handcuffs, we remember he's bent over the hood of the car. Here's a picture of it. And at that moment, he tells the officer, I don't have anything. I've got a gun here. And that's when you hear her say, oh, yeah. And she gets all excited like she just stumbled upon the hideout for Osama bin Laden or something. Remember, this is Alabama, right? Lawful firearm ownership there is not unusual. And telling an officer you have one is generally considered the responsible thing to do. But again, that's why I tell you to keep your evidence to yourself. The officer then removes the firearm, gets all giddy, and now the firearm's not even on Washington's person. So keep this in mind. You got the firearm up here. He's cuffed, compliant, bent over across the hood of her patrol car. He's been disarmed. He certainly can't reach the gun. And then she drive stuns him for a full 5 seconds right in the center of his back, which is when he starts crying. And that's the most heartbreaking thing, because I can only imagine how helpless and how afraid this guy must have felt in this moment. And all you have to do is watch the video, and you can see that she presses the taser into his back and deploys it again for a full 5 seconds while he's handcuffed.
Oh, yeah, I'm not. Oh, my God! Okay, oh, down, oh, my oh, my God.
While he's been over the car and while he's completely compliant. He's completely under control. All she's trying to do is punish him, and you know that because after he cries out in pain, you hear her running her mouth, mocking him, and essentially calling him a bitch.
You want it again?
No, man.
Shut the up. You was big and bad. Shut your up.
She tells him to stop crying and says, do you want it again? Oh, you was all big and bad. And now it's obvious that her entire intention was not to gain compliance. It was to humiliate and punish. And so we have to look at the force here using our Graham versus Connor standard. And as you guys know, you've seen it multiple times, it asks a few questions. What crime was suspected? Well, we can't look at what she made up. We have to look at what the video says because it's the only objective record. But there's no crime here. There's nothing that could be suspected. And then it looks at the second question, which was the suspect an immediate threat? Well, he's disarmed, he's handcuffed, he's bent over, and he's compliant. So no. And that moves us to the third question, which is, was the suspect actively resisting or attempting to flee? Obviously, all the same factors contribute to the answer here. No. So in this case, and according to the complaint, no clear crime justified the detention at all. Washington was handcuffed and disarmed, and as the complaint alleges, he was compliant. The video shows that. We can see it with our own eyes. The second taser deployment becomes very difficult to justify under the Fourth Amendment. But even the first taser deployment is what I would consider to be First Amendment retaliation, because it was in response to Washington's pushback of Officer Elmore that she basically gets his ID. Once he realizes that she's not there to help and that she's going to be pissy about it, he's smart enough to pull out his phone and start filming. Well, you have to remember, as we all know, that recording police officers performing their duties is generally considered protected speech under the First Amendment. A retaliation claim, right, will arise if the person is engaged in protected speech, which we know critical speech of the police officer is protected, and then they have to create a nexus between the adverse action taken by the officer and show that it was motivated by the speech. Well, he gave her the ID, so what else could it be motivated by? If the taser was deployed in response to Washington questioning the detention or saying, why would you have me stand over there in front of your car, or recording the encounter, that could form the basis of a First Amendment retaliation claim. But the real issue here that I see is that this is more egregious than your standard, like run-of-the-mill, the cop is ignorant, doesn't quite understand sequencing under the Fourth Amendment, Terry detention, can't really define RAS, whatever. This is intentional, and it's willful, and it's egregious. And obviously the lawsuit is brought under 42 U.S.C. 1983, which is the statute that allows people to sue government officials who violate their constitutional rights. But there's also a criminal statute that you guys are all familiar with that in cases like this should come into play. Federal law makes it a crime for an officer to willfully deprive someone of constitutional rights while acting under the color of law. But for prosecutors to bring that charge, they must prove that the officer knowingly violated the Constitution and that the violation resulted in bodily injury, at least to get the felony, right? There's two different ways that you can charge that. It's misdemeanor if you don't have bodily injury. That carries a potential sentence of up to a year in federal prison. And then you can make it a felony if you can satisfy the bodily injury element. Well, taser deployments that cause significant pain, as well as pepper spray and all kinds of other things, baton strikes, obviously can satisfy the bodily injury element. But criminal civil rights prosecutions require proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and they are brought only in a small number of cases. But I would make the argument that this is a case where a civil rights deprivation charge is 100% appropriate, because it was obvious by the way she talked to him and treated him that she had absolutely no regard for his rights, and she did intentionally strip them away. I really don't know how you would defend this. I really don't. You know, the simple question for the civil lawsuit is, did the officer have lawful authority to detain him in the first place? And I would say the answer is no, because he gave her the ID. And then the only reason we get the taser is because he pushed back. And the only reason we got the handcuffs is because she brought out the taser. A lot of cops have been trained that if you use force on somebody, you then have to arrest them. And so the idea is, well, I had to use force on you. In my mind, I had to. So now I've got to crump up some charges that follow. If you just read her police report, I'm sure it would say nothing truthful about what actually happened here. But all of this stuff becomes impossible to justify once you actually watch the video. Because when I watch this video, I don't see anything that looks lawful to me at all. And what's happened in the wake of this is that it's just sort of fallen by the wayside. I mean, I've never heard of a case, and it could just be that I just missed it. But it's amazing to me that this lady has apparently been on administrative leave since several months after this happened and it all came to light and the video got on the internet. She's been on administrative leave. So the people of Alabama are still paying her salary as far as I know. In closing, the reason I wanted to highlight this story is because even though I missed it, it cannot be forgotten. This is honestly, it's one of the most heartbreaking things I've ever seen, to see a guy this big and this strong be completely broken and traumatized by somebody who had literally zero reason to treat him the way that she did, except for the fact that she had the weight of the government pinned onto this uniform and nobody in a position of power has chosen to hold her accountable. If you're an Alabama Post person and you're looking at this, there's no justifying this conduct. There's no looking at this thing, well, maybe no, there's nothing here. This guy is well over 6 feet tall. She's a small woman. He had a gun. If he was a threat to her, she would have known it long before she could have done anything about it. Officers who act the way this lady acted are the worst representatives of law enforcement in our country. And if, as a class of law enforcement officers, you can't look at this conduct and say, there's no way I can defend that, until you can acknowledge the worst of you that exists, how are you ever going to get the recognition you demand for the best of you? How are we going to get to a place where we all give you the benefit of the doubt if you are not willing to look at a situation like this and say, that can't be defended, right? And apparently the leaders of Reform Alabama have just been content to act like this didn't happen. Nobody's saying anything about it. This lawsuit is for $20 million and it's still going on. So we're going to follow it. We're going to make sure it doesn't just disappear from the public's awareness. And if you're in anywhere close to Reform Alabama, I suggest you start talking to the people that are in leadership there and start asking some questions about where Dana Elmore is. Are we still paying her? Is she still post-certified? What's going to happen to her? Or you don't see anything here that you could use to fire her? Because I see every reason to never have this lady behind a badge again for the rest of her life. So anyway, those are my thoughts on it. I'd like to hear what you guys think about it. Let me know in the comments. I'd like to invite you to check us out on all the socials. I'll put up a QR code here for you to scan with your phone. That'll take you to the Linktree site where you can check us out on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Substack. You can join on a paid tier Substack if you want, but that's only for people who want to support the channel monetarily. I don't put anything on these platforms that people have to pay for. If you don't want to go to other platforms, but you'd like to support monetarily, I'll leave my Venmo and PayPal links both here on the screen as well as in the description. Please remember to like and subscribe and leave a comment on the video. Check out some of the other videos on the channel. Leave a comment on there as well. Until I see you again, take care. Always film your interactions with the police and keep your evidence to yourself.